Okay, this how-to video is going to go through how to configure a CIS database using a Windows-compliant ODBC database format. So that can be a Microsoft Excel file, a Microsoft Access file, or an SQL database, and you use an ODBC connector to be able to connect to this. So if you go to the control panel of any computer, there's something called Administrative Tools, and then you'll see there's some ODBC data sources. There's 32-bit and 64-bit. So since 17.2, OrCAD Capture CIS is now a 64-bit only, so we'd need to use the 64-bit data source. Now I will add one other comment here, is that depending on your Access database, because some Microsoft Office versions are 32-bit, you might need to run a specific executable. If you go to the Parallel Systems web page and go to the user guides section, so guides along the top, then we have something called Capture CIS Data Sources app note number 14. Now this talks through about effectively using a 64-bit Microsoft Access with a 32-bit database, and what you need to do, you go through, follow these instructions, and that would allow you to get the data source set up correctly. If you haven't got that and it's just a 64-bit to 64-bit, we can basically just click on the data source is 64-bit, system DSN. We can then go and add a new data source. So you choose kind of what you need. Obviously, if it's an SQL database, it'll be one of these. I've got Access here, or an Excel driver here. So I'm going to pick the Access driver. I'm going to give it a name, so MyDB. MyDB is the test or the description, and then I go and select the actual database. So I have an Access version file here, so we'll select that and then click OK, and then that adds the data source here. So we'll click OK to that. We can then actually go to OrCAD Capture, and it's Options, CIS Configuration, and then we click on New, and this goes through a default wizard to create the DBC file. So we'll click on Next. Then you'll see a list of all the data sources that you have. So it's MyDB was the one that I had. And then here's a list of the tables that are available in that database. So I'm just going to configure a couple just for speed. So I want my capacitors, my diodes, and my ICs table. Then I need to map some of the key properties. So I've got part number and value, and these are just table headings or properties inside the headings, columns inside the database table. So I've got a part number, I've got a value property, and that repeats for the three tables that I've chosen. And then I need to do part type and schematic part for the three tables, and then I've got a choice for PCB footprint and PSpice templates, and again these are just properties, so I've got one in here called PSpice template, and we'll repeat that for the three tables. Then what properties do I want to transfer the design? So when I do a double click on a part, see the property editor, am I going to see the properties available to me? So certain properties you might want to add, certain properties you might, maybe you want to put the description in there as well. We'll just click next. Haven't got any browsable properties, things like datasheet, or maybe you wanted to have a link to a step model or something like that, a viewer. You can obviously make these properties here if you wanted that. We'll click on next. What's the key property? So when I'm doing a search, value is the key property, so I'll leave that as the default. It then effectively brings up the configure database option, and these are all the tables and the properties that are going to be transferred for me. So there are a couple of things you can look at. You can look at things like the admin preferences, whether you want to use a temporary part number, do not stuff. In this example I'm going to use not fitted. This is if you're using variant parts. I'm also going to add a relational database, so my primary key is the part number, and my relational table is the manufacturer parts one. There's another video on relational databases if you want to look at that one. Might give you a bit more detail, and then I will need to go and save the DBC file. And then that sets up my database. So if I then go to a page and do place database part, there's my database, there's my three tables, and if I expand any of these, I've got all my parts, all my tables, click on any of the parts, and there's the relational database as well.